Hello everybody and welcome to the third video in our series of videos on the French Revolution. As always, we begin with our learning outcomes. By the end of this presentation, you guys should know what led to the August decrees and what they were. You guys should then know what the Declaration of the Rights of Man was and some of the problems with this declaration. And finally, you guys should know what the Women's March on Versailles was and some of its consequences. So last time out, we looked at the convening of the Estates General, the establishment of the National Assembly, how fears over the National Assembly being closed led to the storming of the Bastille. Today we will begin by picking up one of the consequences of the storming of the Bastille and following that thread all the way through to the Women's March on Versailles. As we said last time, the great fear spread throughout the countryside. Remember, feudalism still existed in France. This is where peasants were obliged to live on their lord's land and pay rent, give free labour and a share of their produce, as well as use mills and wine presses and pay these seigneurial dues and stuff like that. This still existed in France at the time. Now, the unrest in the countryside had really been building since there had been another grain shortage in the spring of 1789, and also there were rumours that the second estate or the nobility were concocting a famine plot to starve the population. So the peasants' unrest really began on the 22nd of July 1789, which would have been about a week after the storming of the Bastille. The riots were becoming more and more violent, as not only were the nobles' property being destroyed, but also there were attacks on the nobles themselves. So the National Assembly, remember, who had been convened to draw up a constitution, decided to try to reform the ancien regime before the peasants' anger exploded and a full-scale revolution broke out. On the night of the 4th of August, an astonishing meeting took place in which the Assembly, they abolished the feudal system in France. It was one of these nights that the participants described it later as really just being caught up in this almost surreal experience where more and more concessions were being made and more ideas of freedom for people were really being expressed in this meeting that happened on the 4th of August. They also got rid of the Second Estate's rights as lords to the manor, and they got rid of tithes, which, remember, was the tax paid to the First Estate, or to the clergy as we call them. So this event is known as the August Decrees. They had that night, and then by the 11th of August they had written down these decrees. Soon after this, the head of the National Guard, the Marquis de Lafayette, pushed for a document enshrining the rights that the people of France had won with the setting up of the National Assembly. And this document was known as the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, but is sometimes shortened to the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Again, this was inspired by the ideas of Rousseau and Montesquieu. The main ideas of the Declaration are summed up in the slogan, the very famous slogan of the French Revolution: Liberté, Egalité et Fraternité. Liberty meaning that people should be free from slavery and oppression. Equality meaning that all people should be treated the same, no matter how much money that they had or how much land that they owned. And finally, fraternity was the belief that the people of France were a brotherhood. However, there were problems with the Declaration. These ideals did not extend to the slaves in the colonies. However, perhaps one of the greatest revolutions in history was inspired by this declaration, as when the slaves in the French-owned colony of Saint-Domingue, which is now known as Haiti, they heard about the declaration, and it inspired them, and they launched a successful revolution under the leadership of the man pictured here, Toussaint Louverture, and this is known as the Haitian Revolution. It's probably one of the most amazing revolutions to ever take place. These rights also didn't extend to women. However, women are to play a crucial role in the next stage of the revolution. So after the National Assembly abolished feudalism and wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, they got to work on what they were supposed to be doing all along. They started writing a constitution. However, as the Assembly continued meeting, Conservatives began working together to try to limit the power of the people. However, on the 5th of October 1789, bread riots broke out in Paris due to bread scarcity or grain scarcity, leading to the Women's March on Versailles. Women in Paris led this march, and they armed themselves by raiding local armories and marched to Louis XVI's residence outside of Paris at the Versailles Palace, which we can see pictured below here. The National Guard, remember, who had been formed, they refused to fire on these women, and instead they joined the women who were their mothers and their sisters in this march, with their commander, the Marquis de Lafayette, powerless to stop them. He therefore joined them to try to get a handle on the situation. He sent riders ahead to warn Louis of what was coming, but with over 10,000 women standing outside the palace, demanding change, demanding things, their situation be improved, the situation had the potential to explode. When the women actually did break into the palace, it would have been terrifying for the royal family, but a few National Guardsmen and Lafayette pushed them back out, and they advised Louis on what to do next. So what did Louis do to try to extricate himself from this position? He promised to ship bread into the city. He said he'd already put out orders to ship bread into the city. He also decided to sign the August Decrees and Declaration of the Rights of Man. He had, after the kind of Conservatives started to take over the National Assembly, he had went back on his promise to sign the August Decrees and Declaration of the Rights of Man. He also agreed to have the National Guard as his personal bodyguard, as the people of Paris trusted the National Guard but not the army. And finally, and possibly most crucially, he decided that he and his family would return to France to live in the Tuileries Palace. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. So by now you guys should know what led to the August Decrees and what they were. You guys should know what the Declaration of the Rights of Man was and some of the problems with it. And finally, you guys should know what the Women's March of Versailles was and some of the consequences of it. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys got something good from this video.